Welcome into another Disney World edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. My name's Barrett Salee. Appreciate you checking out the show. It is another audio-only version of the show today. Why? It's our last day at Walt Disney World. We've done all the parks. We're going back to Epcot today. We're eating and drinking around the world. We're meeting up with some friends. And I think most importantly, we are riding Guardians of the Galaxy again, maybe 2 times, because for those who have not been down, I'm not just selling you on this because my wife's a Disney travel agent, although we did schedule a trip for a famous Georgia assistant coach this week. But for those who have not done Guardians of the Galaxy at Epcot, it is the best ride I have ever been on. Absolutely incredible. And I'm not even that much of a fantasy type guy, but I do love Guardians of the Galaxy, and it is absolutely phenomenal. So we are down in Disney World. No video today, only audio, but that's okay because a lot of you guys are driving around, sitting at work, whatever. So we're here for you. There's a lot going on in the world of college football this week, over the last couple of days since the last time we recorded an episode. I think most importantly, and the biggest news, was the story that Chris Lowe from ESPN put out last, I guess it was yesterday, about the search for Nick Saban's replacement. So we'll get into that, not necessarily a ton on the Alabama side, but more on sort of the ancillary stories that came through there. Some of them have to do with Alabama and some of them don't, but there was a lot going on in that story that I think that needs to be discussed. We'll also talk about Jackson Dart, the Ole Miss quarterback who had a little bit of a procedure done a couple weeks ago. We're still sort of finding out news on that. We'll also talk about my old colleague, Tom Fornelli's quarterback power rankings, and we'll wrap it up with a little bit of talk on West Virginia and Neil Brown. Neil Brown got a contract extension. Some people need some answers as to why. We will provide them here on the show. Remember, head to breakingtea.com/smothered and covered for your viral college football t-shirts. Wear the moment, anything that's viral, anything that happens, anything you want to remember as a fan, they have it over at Breaking Tea. And even some historic shirts as well. So go to breakingtea.com/smothered and covered. Check out what they have. I really appreciate it. Also, if you're a Braves fan, and you know I am, there's some Braves shirts there that you need to check out. breakingtea.com/Barrett if you want to see those. BARRETT. breakingtea.com/Barrett. Also, little birdie told me there might be some classic player t-shirts coming out here in the near future before the season starts. I'm just saying, it might be something that's happening. So check them out, Breaking Tea. They do a great job. Wear the moment. All right, let's get into this piece from Chris Lowe, because you can go into about 50 different directions when breaking this thing down. But I'm only going to go in 2 or 3, maybe 4. First things first, the timeline, I think, is sort of the crux of the story. But I think the interesting part is why he left after this. And talks about him going to Florida, Jupiter, Florida, after the Rose Bowl loss and talking to it with Miss Terry. But what's interesting is that he kind of made it sound, and I was shocked when I read this, that this wasn't his favorite team. Or maybe in retrospect, he wasn't as proud of this team as maybe I thought. And the reason I say that is because on the podium after the game, I thought he was done. I thought he was done because this was the best team he's had in terms of most satisfaction it provided him. But then you read this story and it talks about how he was disappointed with his team, that you got to win with class, and they were kicking helmets and throwing pads and all this other stuff in the locker room. You don't say that if you're not happy with this team. I mean, this is an on-the-record story. You say that on purpose. And Saban opening up, I'm totally fine with that. But that's not something necessarily you see from Saban. But also, why would you be proud of that? Why would you, if you're Saban, be proud of that? You wouldn't. So I think maybe the team itself and how it ended, how they took losing, maybe changed his opinion of the 2023 Alabama Crimson Tide. So I was very interested in that. But I think what's most important, and he kind of played it down, but then he also played it up, is what it's like to coach in this day and age. And I think we all know that money is a huge deal, but this paragraph, this quote, stood out to me more than anything else. And that is, after meeting with his players, 70 or 80% of his players, or whatever it was, um, after getting back to Tuscaloosa, he talks about how, and he says this, I thought he had a hell of a team next year, that maybe 70 or 80% of the players you talk to, they want to know two things. What assurances do I have that I'm going to play because they're thinking about transferring, and how much are you going to pay me? Our program has always been built on how much value you can create for your future and personal development, academic success, and graduating and developing an NFL career on the field. So it 100% is about the new age of college football that Saban is frustrated about in terms of his decision making, in terms of his players moving forward. That is reality. And in the past, Saban has adapted or died. He's done that multiple times. He did that when Lane Kiffin was hired in 2014 because he knew he had to institute a spread offense, which incidentally, he was also fighting against spread offenses. He and Brett Bielema were trying to incorporate that 10-second rule, which was just ridiculous. But he didn't want to adapt anymore, and that is a direct reflection of age and effort. He's too old to put up with this stuff. That's basically what he's saying. He's too old to put up with this. Like Danny Glover in Lethal Weapon. I'm too old for this. Not safe for work word. And I would say it, but my kids are sitting here in the hotel room at Disney, so I really can't say that word. But yeah, I think it's clear. He didn't want to deal with this. And I don't blame him. It's hard to be a coach in this day and age. Two other things that came from here. And I think some people, I haven't had a ton of time to do research on X because we've been at the Disney parks and all this other stuff. But I don't know if this part got as much run as it probably should. And it's not that, Dabo Swinney and Lane Kiffin were both part of this, on an ancillary part because Alabama didn't really go into discussions with them. Because the story says it was just Kalen DeBoer and Mike Norvell. But one thing stood out in this story that I think is indicative of where Alabama is in the pecking order and really the state of the coaching industry as a whole. This quote, and this is from Chris Lowe, stands out to me. It says, Steve Sarkisian, who, like Kiffin, is also represented by Jimmy Sexton, was another prominent name mentioned in media reports, but Alabama's leadership knew Sarkisian wasn't going to leave Texas, especially with the Longhorns moving to the SEC next season. This is from sources. Too low. Alabama didn't even go after Sark because basically it knew where it stood in the pecking order. Now, that's not the way it is going to be all the time during these coaching searches for Alabama moving forward, but the fact that it recognized that in this situation, it's not even worth going after the Texas head coach speaks volumes to me. It speaks to me that Alabama is not a better job than Texas. And it's not. And before you come at me, Alabama fans, and I know you will, it's not me saying this. It's the sources to Chris Lowe. It's Greg Byrne recognizing where Alabama is right now. To me, that shows good leadership. To me, that shows that Greg Byrne gets it. He understands that, hey, there's no way in hell a Texas head coach is coming to Alabama right now. It could change the next go-round. But to follow a legend like Nick Saban at Alabama with a guy, if you're Texas, Steve Sarkisian's not leaving. There's no way he's leaving. Alabama could pay him $15 million. Doesn't matter. I saw some folks maybe giving Alabama some grief about on X about this. I think you have to look at that and say, wow, Greg Byrne knows his stuff. Greg Byrne understood the assignment. Last thing before we switch gears to something else. The last thing that stood out in this story to me was that, I mean, obviously Lanning and these other guys used Alabama as leverage, as they should. But that Mike Norvell was the other serious candidate. And obviously, I get that. And it certainly seemed like he was maybe the top candidate at times in this article. But this is Chris Lowe talking. So, I mean, you can't take a whole lot from that. But one little sentence in there kind of piqued my interest. And that is, if Norvell had left, then Florida State was going to target Lane Kiffin. His sources to ESPN that Florida State was poised to move quickly if that happened, and that Kiffin would be a prime candidate to replace Norvell. That would never happen. And look, Florida State fans, you know I've had your back. You know that I was with you with the college football playoff. You know that I'm with you through a lot of this stuff. Lane Kiffin would not have gone to Florida State. And I'm not saying Florida State's a worse job than a lesser job than Ole Miss. I'm saying for Kiffin right now, he has built Ole Miss to a point where it's going to be a consistent college football playoff team. Ole Miss is going to be a consistent college football playoff team because Lane Kiffin has mastered the transfer portal. He understands what he needs to do at Ole Miss, a very specific set of goals and a very specific job that requires a different kind of attention. And I'm talking about going for it to the nth degree when it's there, and it's there. He's throwing all his chips in the middle of the table right now, and he has to. And at the SEC level, he's going to get more chances because he's going to get more players. He's going to get more players that are developed elsewhere. He's got more money, all that stuff. He doesn't have that money at Florida State because the gap is going to widen because Florida State is stuck in the ACC. Now, would that change over the next 3 or 4 years? Maybe. Probably. But right now, there's no reason to go. I think Ole Miss can make the playoff 2 out of every 3 years with Lane Kiffin there if he continues to implement his plan the way that he has so far. Speaking of Ole Miss, Jackson Dart, it was revealed yesterday that he had a surgery in January over an ankle. Now, I think there are 2 ways to look at this. I think the one way is that, it's an ankle injury. This is going to really hurt him. I think that's the proper way to look at this, honestly, because, having it done in January and getting it out of the way before spring practice and, maybe even skipping spring practice, whatever, that makes sense. But for those of us who have watched Jackson Dart play pretty much every snap, that dude does not know how to slide. He absolutely does not know how to slide. So you're telling me now that he's got a bum ankle and he definitely is going to be a bigger part of the rushing attack this year. I love Ulysses Bentley. I love Logan Diggs. I don't think the loss of Quinshon Judkins is going to be an awful lot. But the reason I thought that is because I thought Jackson Dart was going to provide a lot on the ground. If he doesn't learn how to slide, then that's going to be a problem. And even if he does continue to play the way that he has during the majority of his career, that's dangerous. That's dangerous. So keep an eye on that. And I don't necessarily think you should keep an eye as to what happens in the offseason. But just when the season rolls around, check out how he plays. Because if he goes all out the way he has consistently, then he's going to put himself at risk to re-injure an ankle that he's already struggling with. Tom Fornelli, my ex-colleague at CBSSports.com, put out his top 10 quarterback power rankings. And I absolutely love it, except for one specific player. You probably can guess who that is. But not surprising, Carson Beck, Quinn Ewers, 1 and 2. You could switch them if you want. Doesn't matter. Noah Fafita, if you haven't watched him, you should. Jackson Dart at 4. Shedeur Sanders at 5. I do think he's that good because Colorado didn't have an offensive line. There are 4 people in my hotel room right now. My 6-year-old daughter, my 12-year-old son, my wife, Nancy, and me. We could do a better job blocking for Shedeur Sanders than his offensive line did last year. It was that bad. So for Shedeur at 5, on board completely. Riley Leonard at 6, and then Will Howard at 7. Seems like every time Will Howard's name pops up anywhere, he ends up on this show because I don't think he's even going to start for Ohio State. He couldn't start at Kansas State. Avery Johnson was. We all heard about Devin Brown a couple days ago complaining that, people just think he's going to go quietly into the night. A, I don't think he will, and B, I think Will Howard might because I don't think he's anywhere near what Devin Brown is, anywhere near what Julian Sayin or Aaron Nolan can be. So I do have issue with Tom, and you can mention him on X. I'm totally fine with that. This one stood out to me, I think, more than any of these. And I think a lot of you would scratch your head going, who? Kyron Drones, Virginia Tech quarterback. Virginia Tech was an afterthought last year. But he took over second half of the season and absolutely blew up over 2,000 yards, almost 900 on the ground. And he did this in, a half a season as a starter and maybe 3 quarters as a player in general. The fact that Tom Tom and I, we love each other. This is part of the reason why I love Tom. Because including Kyron Drones at 8 might seem like a stretch, but I love it, especially considering he's ahead of Dylan Gabriel. I like Dylan Gabriel. I think he can lead Oregon to a playoff, but he is not the kind of guy that can win a college football playoff. And I know what you're saying. It's certainly better than Virginia Tech. Yeah, I mean, the standard's a little different. The bar's a little higher in Eugene than it is in Blacksburg. So I love that. And then Jalen Milroe at 10, not a surprise there that he's in the top 10. I do think the eyes on the spring section of this is really interesting too, because Drew Aller, Jackson Arnold, Nico Iamaleava, Avery Johnson, and Cam Ward were mentioned. I'm very happy that Tom didn't include Cam Ward in his top 10 because I don't think he's really ready for prime time. Drew Aller, I think, is in the eyes on spring section for a little bit of a different story because he doesn't learn how to stretch the field and things might get sketchy, but can't wait to see what Jackson Arnold, Nico Iamaleava, and Avery Johnson do as well. All right, last thing. West Virginia giving Neil Brown an extension 1 year after perhaps he was on the hottest seat in America. What does that mean? Well, you have to reward a dude that went from hot seat to 9-win season. You have to. Even though that's 3 games better than his best season in Morgantown. And this is this is Neil Brown on the news. His first priority was retaining and rewarding his assistant coaches and support staff who have played such a critical role in the success. He appreciates Ren Baker's support on that front, as well as continued commitment. There are great things ahead, blah, 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 whatever. Does it seem weird that a guy who was on the hot seat, maybe the hottest seat in America, set 12 months ago, gets an extension? And on the surface, yeah. But in reality, no. He only made $4 million in 23 and had been set to earn 4.1 in 2024. And his salary will decrease in the new deal. Goes back to 4 for the next couple of seasons and then up to 4.3. And he set aside his increases so he could give more to his staff. That's the right way to go about it. You're committing to him. If you're Ren Baker, you're committing to him a little while longer because he earned it. And quite honestly, $4 million for a guy who won 9 games last year, he's underpaid still. But also Neil Brown, who I absolutely love. I think he's maybe got an unfair shake there. I think it's harder to win at West Virginia, and then the circumstances of COVID and beyond it and all that stuff didn't do him any favors. But to forego potentially a raise, actually take a decrease in your salary and spread it out to your assistants is proof that Neil Brown gets it. He understands that these assistant coaches on the recruiting trail, they do more work, that the NIL program needs more money, needs more structure. I love this. So if it surprised you that Neil Brown got an extension, kind of got a raise and then gave it back, that to me is proof that actually he is the right guy for the job and didn't just have one good season. All right, that'll do it for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. Appreciate you guys taking the time to check out the show. Reminder, share it with your friends. It's on YouTube. It's on Apple. It's on Spotify. It's on Rumble, wherever. It's everywhere. Video portions on YouTube and Rumble, audio versions on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, everywhere else. So spread the word. If you don't like the show, leave a 1-star review. And please, please, please take the time out of your day to tell you why it sucks, why I suck, and what you want to see from this show, because constructive criticism is good for all of us. Enjoy your day, everybody. We'll talk to you probably Friday afternoon, maybe Friday morning if I can get to this before we head to the airport and head back from Disney World to Atlanta. Enjoy your Thursday.